as you'll see in this chart, can you notice there's a bit of a tension going on there? There's a bit of a, you know, even if you don't know about astrology, actually, seeing this, it's like a big seesaw. You know, this person, Bernadette, has got a lot down here and then a lot up here, and they are in opposition, like they're pulling at each other, which is a very sort of full moon kind of energy. So I'm just scanning through my message with her to see what it was that she wanted me to have a look at. Now, my chart today, Bernadette, has had a couple of astrologers. She's had a couple of sessions with astrologers, and they've kind of disagreed with each other, which I don't think is helpful, is it? You know, when one person's saying, oh, this is how it is, and then someone's saying, oh, no. I wonder if I'm going to provide a third perspective.
Coffee.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, wonderful. Sorry?
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so okay, so this is rubbish, isn't it? I'm just reading a message and like not saying anything. Anyway, there's some difficulty in understanding the Pluto according to these astrologers. Now, Pluto, right down here, as you can see, is very, very close to this very, very strong angle here, which is the IC, which is known as the angle to do with the home. You know, it's the seat of everything intimate with us. You know, it represents our childhood, our relationships with our parents, how secure we were when we were being raised. And also it speaks about the home that we hope to live in one day, or the home that kind of comes up. And Pluto is the planet of transformation. Now, for anyone, I mean, transformation sounds quite jolly, really, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like it could rip you apart at the seams. However, some transformations do occur like that. In fact, most of them feel like that. And anyone that's had Pluto go over their sun or an angle or their moon will know that. You know, for instance, anyone that has Capricorn sun or moon or ascendant will know that in the last 10 years, they've been really pulled apart in quite a major way. So Pluto here, having Pluto here is a very, very strong indication of almost quite a fated life, you know, often where yielding has been the only thing that Bernadette can do. It's really quite tricky. Now, she's also got the South Node here. So I've spoken recently about the North Node. The South Node is always in opposition. And her North Node and her South Node are both at 0 degrees, as they would be across a very, very sensitive point. This is the Aries 0 point, and this is the Libra 0 point. This corresponds with the actual start of the zodiac. I mean, obviously, it looks like a continuous circle, but, you know, even in a continuous circle, there is a metaphorical or metaphysical starting point and an ending point, and they just blend into each other. But it's pretty significant. And it represents the first moment of going into spring. It represents the spring equinox. And the South Node here represents the autumn equinox. Now, in many respects, like 0 point Aries is also really representing the identity, the self. It's very much like the ascendant. And the South Node is very much like the descendant. And so it feels very much like there's this very big tug of war going on for Bernadette in her birth chart makeup. For instance, the North Node, which also is in the 10th house, and the 10th house is about her career and how she makes her way in the world, is very much is very much based on her identity with this sort of 0 point Aries North Node. And if you see, you'll notice at 0 degrees, we've also got Chiron, and Chiron's the wounded healer. And so if we imagine, like, what does if you combined the energies of the wounded healer with the North Node, which is about our karmic direction, and then also think, okay, it's also got something to do with a personal identity, and also stepping out into life and stepping out as a career. That's a huge energetic to be carrying on your shoulders. And it would have been very huge for Bernadette when she was very young and not able to cope with some of these emotions that would have been coming up for her. And if she was lucky, she'd have had people that could protect her and show her some of the tendencies that were coming up and how maybe she could cope with it. Chiron sometimes shows us where we get really good mentors, but it can also show up early, until we get used to asking for help and get used to the feeling of vulnerability. Until we can ask for help, it's very difficult to get over the vulnerabilities as represented by Chiron. And then she's got Venus here as well, which can represent a girl, and it can also represent Bernadette as a young woman. It can also represent who she loves and who she has flow with. And Venus is also about the flow of life, the flow of beauty, the flow of joy, and all of those things. And if you look down here, Bernadette's got more planets down here. So she's got Uranus and Jupiter together. Now, Uranus is another one of those really big planets. And for anyone that's been watching my show quite a bit, you'll know that I've mentioned more than a few times that in the mid-60s, there's this very difficult pattern where you've got Pluto and Uranus together, and then you've got Chiron in opposition. And in the mid-60s, you've also got Saturn there. Thankfully, Saturn has moved on a bit, but it's been replaced with the North and the South nodes, which is also very tricky, and also Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is also known as a benefic, like Venus. It's a planet that brings us luck and brings us a feeling of grace and a feeling of expansion. But if you also think, what is expansion in its very nature, you'll know that it's about things getting bigger. And of course, if things are getting bigger, they could also be said to be inflamed. They could be getting out of control. So what is going on as I'm looking at this is that like Uranus brings in breaks, it brings in shocks, it brings in upsets, it brings in disruption, it brings up quite a disrupting energy at home. And in the conjunction with Jupiter, that can really inflame it and make it so much bigger and harder to cope with. So she's got this huge thing going on here. Now, she's also in her message pointed out to me, and this is something that she's worked out for herself, but has also, it's been shared with her via the astrologers as well, I think. Like the 6th house is about health. And she's got a conjunction between Mars and Neptune in the sign of Scorpio. And then this conjunction can be quite difficult because Mars shows us our vitality, our strength, our like the flow of our blood, the beat of our heart. Mars is very much about I would say the veins and our energy and having the get up and go and being able to survive. Basically, Mars is all about survival. And then Neptune can be really insidious. I mean, I think Neptune, when it's poorly aspected, although this Neptune isn't that poorly aspected, it has got a square to the sun, which is difficult. It's not a tight square, but she does have a square to the sun via Neptune. But like the sun is also about our vitality and our strength as well. So she's got this difficult aspect to Neptune, and Neptune can show up in terms of autoimmune disorders. In fact, I've got these two in a conjunction in my chart in a square to my moon. And I've had all sorts of like ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, post-viral fatigue syndrome, and I've had very strong reactions when I've had drugs. I've been hospitalized because of pharmaceutical things that I've taken. So I've got to be a little bit sensible, and also look at things that are coming into me. I always think with Neptune in a difficult position, it shows a sensitivity to chemicals, to energy, to other people's moods, I also think psychic attacks. They're a little harder to prove, but Neptune is also a planet that is full of guilt and shame and blame, and then Mars is very good with anger and resentment, and so the two of them together, I think, also coincide with people pleasers who are guilt catchers. And eventually they can become very good guilt throwers as well. And they can, guilt is that gift that keeps on giving. So that's very strong. But with also with Mars and Neptune in a conjunction, or even in a square or an opposition, what I have noticed is it's very easy to get despondent. So it's like the vitality almost gets sucked up by the sort of nebulousness of Neptune, and it becomes very difficult to be able to put your finger on what is causing it. It's almost like you're gaslighting yourself, or your body is gaslighting. It's like self-sabotage, but like an unconscious self-sabotage. And by its very meaning, like self-sabotage, we're not always that aware of what we're doing, but with this, it's like the body is self-sabotaging. And I also think with this particular thing as well, is that it can it can also create obviously like depression and things like that. So there's a physical, there's a spiritual, and then there's this kind of very undefined direction. It's very difficult to find our direction and to move forwards. And like Mars is all about moving forwards. The great thing with Mars here in the 6th house is, Bernadette is really able to do a lot of work, but she's probably got to really manage her energy systems. And without breaking any confidence, I know that she has been diagnosed with an autoimmune issue. But I do also see that she's got this lovely trine to Chiron. And like I said, Chiron is the wounded healer, but he's also a mentor that comes and shows up and is able to help us. So at some level, I think there is help around. And it's probably shown up at different times. It might be that she is divinely protected on a kind of spiritual sense. It might be that the right people show up at the right time, or that pain gets to a certain level, and then it's almost like there is a cutoff point. It feels like there is a level of protection. And I would imagine that when strong things go over this area, there is a kind of healing point. There's a moment when things start to heal and repair. Mars is also in a very good sextile with the vertex and Mercury, and is also in a very strong sextile to Pluto. Now, Pluto and Mars in a sextile is very strong. So I can see it would be a mystery with illnesses as they come up, and autoimmune disorders as they come up. And yet, one of the biggest mysteries is it feels like there's a lot of inherent strength with Bernadette. And it's almost like, she really shouldn't be ill. And yet something is coming up, and it's like getting to that absolute core. And I can see the absolute frustration of it. And the South Node down here, the South Node often shows us, if you believe in past lives, it shows us where we're coming from and what may have been brought into this lifetime with us. Could it be something like a generational something, that's been passed down from, grandmother to mother to child, and then so on and so forth? Is it something that is like a past life that has been carried through, some kind of trauma that is reenacting itself and kind of coming in? I think, with Neptune involved, that often shows up, because Neptune really shows us the veils of reality, and that we are living in one veil of reality, but Neptune really shows where we're connecting to another and to another and to another. And so one of my questions is, as I'm looking at this chart, is, has Bernadette ever been checked for energy leakages, like, is there an energetic connecting to a different life, a different place, a different veil, a different dimension, a different reality? I would imagine times like this, like right now, would be extremely difficult, because it feels like half of humanity are like in one place. It feels like humanity is separating quite, I would love to say gently, but to me it feels it's quite vicious, and not because people are wanting to be vicious with each other, but it feels like there's lots of people bifurcating. It's like there is this split, like the parting of the Red Sea, people on one side and people on the other, for all different types of reasons. So there is this energy of breaking down and breaking apart right now, and with Bernadette's very sensitive system and her immune system, the 6th house here is all about our health. And then the 4th house, which is about our stability, is also about the building blocks of our body as well. So both of these I see as being part of her immune response. Whilst they're talking to each other, it looks to me, and obviously I'm not a doctor, and I'm pretty sure you didn't believe that I was anyway, but just to be really sure. But, it feels like, there is something very subtle underneath it all, pinning it all together. And I wonder where it's come from. And it may well be about her belief systems. The belief systems all start here, that came from childhood. And it could, I would absolutely recommend any kind of trauma release to explore those things, and also any kind of doctoring that looks at trauma and the causes of it, and shocks in particular, seeing as Uranus is here, and Pluto is here with the South Node. They're very shocking, and Jupiter can absolutely build into it. Ultimately, like when I look at charts, I always think, what is the unconscious mind trying to do, and what is the conscious mind trying to do? Because, when I trained in hypnotherapy, one of the things I learned is that there is just really one core job of your unconscious mind, and that is to keep you alive. And it will do anything it can, in its directive to keep you alive. And to keep you alive, it might actually need you to sicken sometimes, or to get hooked on something. Because, for instance, like, with an alcoholic, so many people say, oh, just quit and you'll be fine. You're doing yourself more damage. But the unconscious mind doesn't always make sense. Like for some person, it may have been more damaging to be able to see the truth of a situation. And so the unconscious mind thinks, okay, I need to cloud this situation to keep this body going, to keep this person alive. So there's all sorts of different reasons. And I think looking deeply into the inner programming is utterly essential. But this isn't actually all of what, I've been asked to do. She's got this very interesting, what's known as a yod between her 11th and her 9th and her 4th. Now, a yod is formed with two angles of 150 degrees. So there's a 150 degree angle here between the Sun and Pluto. And this is, it's a very, very tight one. It's 151 degrees. It's pretty close. Now, these are actually seen as magical angles. Not every astrology believes so, but there's a type of astrology called magi astrology, and they absolutely see the perfection with these 150 degree angles. They create a tension that is resolvable, but is complex enough that we do something about it. And we have to almost enact a bit of our innate magic to be able to access what we need. And so here between the Sun and Pluto, this is about our identity, and Pluto is showing us what is controlling us. And so at some level, it feels like Bernadette struggles to express herself fully because there are controls at home. There are things at home stopping her from living quite freely. and her sun in the sign of Aquarius is all about freedom of movement, especially in the ninth house. The ninth house is about awakening. It's about freedom. It's about learning. It's about belief systems, spirituality. In the sign of Aquarius, it's also very much about astrology too, and any kind of system of thought and system of consciousness. There's so much there for Bernadette to explore. And because of the circumstances that she lives with, it's very difficult for her to be able to explore everything that she would love to explore. And I don't know if Bernadette's actually listening live. Let me just check. I can't see her in the comments, so I think she's going to be listening into this after the show. So I won't reveal any more personal information, but suffice to say, where Pluto shows up, it represents something quite challenging. It represents an energy system whereby it feels the more we fight against it, the more we're fighting. Like in Bernadette's case, she's fighting for her freedom. She's fighting for her opportunity to explore. She's fighting for her opportunity to be free. She's fighting for her opportunity to expand and be absolutely 100% free to expand. And at some level, she just can't. And with Pluto, the more we fight, it's almost like one of those. I remember watching one of the Star Wars movies years ago where someone got their finger caught in a hole, and the more they fought against it, the more they were pulled in, a bit like quicksand. If you're fighting in the quicksand, you just get sucked under really quick. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And it's almost like when you play dead and you stop fighting, even though that fight could absolutely kill you and suck you under and destroy the ego, and the sun is like the ego, it can absolutely destroy that semblance of freedom that she's longing for. And yet it's in the letting go with Pluto that we find the freedom and we find the answer. Now, this is going to be hard because there's quite a few different aspects of Bernadette's chart that are holding her in place in quite a painful way. And so me sharing, the more you're fighting over this, Bernadette, the more trapped you're going to get. And actually, as you let go, there'll be more energy available for you to explore. It's just you'll be exploring life in a different way. But there is, like Pluto shows us where we need to yield. And now, the other thing that's connecting into her yod, and it's not an exact yod, sometimes they really come down where they're like the point is absolute to one planet. This is just slightly off to the side. So she's got Vesta here that is connected to our truth, our sacred truth. And it is connected to exactly to Uranus. So we've got this difficult to realize aspect of her truth, her need for friendships, her need for alliance, her need for support, her need for a really big network. And there is something that appears shocking and difficult to process, i.e., Uranus and the north and the south node. It feels like shocks from the past are preventing her from being able to connect with full authenticity to a network. Now, is that because of shame? There's no need for any shame, by the way, Bernadette, but is it from some, I don't know what it is, but it feels like there's an emotional shock that is holding her in place, almost holding her captive from connecting to really great networks that will help her, networks that will support her. And possibly there's the difficulty that the networks aren't very accessible. They're not easy to find. They're very, very specialist. And so it's very difficult. So there's these two very difficult things. Now, the rumors and what I've observed with the finger of Yod is wherever the Yod is pointing to is representing like the sum total of the resolution of the issue. And so her Yod is pointing to Pluto, the South Node, and also Uranus. Now, it's all in the 4th house, which is about her childhood. It's also possibly about past lives, because the 4th house is about past lives as well. It's about the past. It could very well be about one or both parents and the home situation. It could also have some kind of shock, nasty shock, horrible shock involved in that, i.e. Pluto can represent the death of somebody or the sudden change of somebody, and Uranus is obviously the shock and what's going on. And the South Node is very much a representation. Again, I have to just premise it, it's past life stuff if you believe in past lives. If you don't, then consider it's something that may be carried genetically. It might be something that is a family pattern that has been passed down. It's like a repeated pattern, and in the repeat of it is also coming more feeling of shock and more feeling of defeat and being kind of crushed by the circumstances. I mean, as an astrologer, if I was to, do a vote with people and say, okay, which planets in the 4th house create the most difficult childhoods, or the ones that, are really quite crippling, but could actually lead to something really, really sort of breakthrough-y. I'm pretty sure every astrologer would say Uranus in the 4th house, Pluto in the 4th house, a node in the 4th house. The other thing I think is Chiron, and Chiron's in her 10th house, which is the other house associated with parents and feeling successful in life. So this is a huge thing. And, what I do notice, I mean, obviously I haven't got loads and loads of time to explain and unpick this reading for Bernadette, but she's got this very sensitive point here at 0 degrees. Chiron's already gone past it. Neptune is getting closer to it, which isn't necessarily helpful. Neptune tends to fog things a little bit. So already, as Neptune is getting closer to it, it's probably brought up this feeling of the burden of what Bernadette has been carrying and the need for a release, but not necessarily knowing where it is. It's almost like a life quest. It feels like she is getting the Holy Grail, but there's no instruction manual, and it's like in another language as well, when it comes through, it's channeled through. But Neptune also does show where we are mystical. It shows where we're intuitive, and the fact that Neptune is getting very close to her Chiron could be an indication that there's mystical teachers around her, that there are really good mentors, that there could be somebody who could help her with what she's going through. And I would be on the lookout for that. But again, with Neptune, you've got to watch out, because Neptune can be really mystical and elevated, but it can also represent people that are slightly less than honest as well. And, obviously in the category of new age, there are, one thing that any good coach suffers is the fact that there's lots of charlatans around as well. And we all get tarred with the same brush. So I think it's something that if Bernadette could get very good at dowsing and using her own intuition and absolutely studying her own level of discernment, that seems to be something that's really, really vital for her in these coming days, months, and whatnot. What I like about this is the fact that she's got her North Node and South Node at 0 degrees and her Chiron at 0 degrees. 0 degrees in sign of Aries could be, it's like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Like it's almost like the address or the key to the universal energy. So I actually don't think she needs to suffer any longer than she needs to. And I'm not saying that to discount her experience to date or anything like that, or to invalidate her journey so far. Absolutely not saying that at all. But what I do think is possible is something quite miraculous can take place. And I would also say, if something miraculous doesn't take place, not to take it to heart and think, oh, I'm obviously not worthy, because the potential of something very quick, simple and complete is there. So I don't think, like, I know that Bernadette and I came into a conversation around the time of the North Node changing signs just 3 weeks ago, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, because, you know, we were saying, oh yeah, it's just gone into the sign of Aries. And then we were talking about her chart and I said, oh, it's going to go over that 0 point in 18 months time. And that looks a bit like a countdown, 18 months before it gets to this very sensitive point, which could be a super strong release point. Because around that time, Neptune is also going to be right slap bang over that. What I would do if I was in your shoes right now is, and this is, I don't know if this can be helpful or not, Bernadette, but what I would do is look at the past. To me, the Yod is pointing at the past. It's pointing at your childhood. It's pointing at your ancestry. It's pointing at past lives. I don't think it's important for you to beat yourself up. I think this almost, you know, as I look at this, obviously I think we are divine creators. I also believe we take responsibility for what comes in, but I also see a very strong scenario that was happening around you that had very little to do with you, and yet you have taken it on. So if I was in your shoes right now, any mode of healing work that I would be going through would involve an element of unpicking the responsibility that you feel and that you feel you carry, and somehow cleansing it, or almost like like exorcising it, almost like the pattern stops here, some kind of uninvite spell, but, you know, on a health and spiritual and family basis, you know, to stop the past coming into the future. I don't know how that happens exactly, because I'm not the person here to heal you. I'm just here to look at the potentials in your chart. Other things I think are really significant, given that you're born at the time where Uranus and Jupiter are together in a conjunction. These two are already in a conjunction. They're coming closer and closer in a conjunction. It's really funny, actually. In the last few weeks, I've had lots of people come to me with this pattern in their birth chart. You know, we are coming into the time of rapid change for you, really rapid change. And again, Jupiter makes it bigger, expands, and Uranus cuts things down and cuts things off. So I really think there is a big moment for you where you can expand and cut things off and create a really rapid change. There's so much more I want to tell you, and yet I don't have any more time to talk about this today. But I hope what has come out as I've been looking at your chart, I hope it's been sensitive and insightful in this short space of time. And if there's anything I can do in the future, just let me know. So thank you so much for letting me have a look at your chart, Bernadette. I really appreciate that.